Welcome to the Run for God Run Club, where you will find God in a runner's space.
Welcome to the Run for God Run Club. This is your one stop each week to be motivated and inspired to get off the couch and onto the running trail where you can, in turn, inspire others to do the same. Let's learn, laugh, and leap into running together, giving God the glory for what we are able to do in His name. Amen. I am your running host, Dean Thompson. Did you know that people are watching what you do? You may think that nobody's paying attention, but I assure you they are. And we're going to discuss that. And then I'm going to share a traveling comedy, as I promised I would in last week's podcast. And then joining me to talk about those things and so much more is Run for God founder Mitchell Hollis.
Thanks for having me, Dean. How's your week been so far?
It's been a short week so far, yeah. So we're just getting started good, really, at this point. So getting some stuff.
Well, done. Hey, before we get started, let's talk about this week's sponsor again. If you own a business out there and you would like to support what we do here at Run for God and allow us to support you in the process, we've got some new things going on for our sponsors. We're about to actually start cutting commercials in their own voice, so that's gonna be pretty cool.
Yeah. But
if you own a business out there and again you want to be part of what we do here at Run for God, shoot us an email to runlanehollis@gmail.com and he'll get you all the information. But this week's sponsor is Trinity Disposal. They are the go-to disposal company for Whitfield County and surrounding counties. Trinity offers weekly residential trash collection and commercial front-end dumpsters. Trinity is a very detail-oriented and they have excellent customer service. So if you're interested in top-of-the-line disposal service, Trinity Disposal is the route for you. I'm getting tongue-tied this morning, Dean. But hey, let me just talk about our sponsors for just a second. You know, some of you on here, you're thinking, why are they talking about a disposal company, a garbage service company, in North Georgia? Well, we have a lot of listeners in and around this area, but we also like to highlight people who line up not only with our values, but our values spiritually. Hunter Williams and the whole crew at Trinity Disposal, I know all of them, and they're great. I mean, God is in the name. Trinity Disposal is the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. It's where the name came from. I actually had lunch with Hunter last week, and to show you what kind of customer service they had, I've mentioned this on here before. This morning, my wife is out of town. Yeah. So I don't know what to do when she's out. Nothing gets done around here. And so I forgot to take the garbage out last night. Oops. Well, at 6:45, Hunter texted me. He said, "Hey, did you forget to bring your garbage can outside?" I said, "Yes, I did." He said, "I'll come back if you can have it out there in 10 minutes. What other garbage service is going to do something like that? So, again, I mean, they make what we do possible, and so we're happy to give them a shout-out. So if you're in the North Georgia, Southern Tennessee area, give them a call. Even if you're not around here, give them a call and tell them thank you for supporting Run for God, because it does make a difference.
Amen. Amen. And that's a good group to kick off our fourth year.
It is. This is year number 4 we're starting.
Yeah, year number 4 of this podcast, and so that's crazy to even think about. Would you ever
have thought it?
No. When we first started it, we thought, hey, we're going to just try this thing. 4 years later, every week for 4 years, here we are.
Gay and I were talking this morning, and we've got the potential to be making some more changes around here, which is good. We're growing, and so I was talking about there's some things that I would like to get off my plate. Some of the things that I'm not real good at, but, we're a small ministry, so we put the hat on of janitor and customer service. We put all the hats on, but there's a few hats I would like to get rid of. And I said, I would like to do that so I could focus more on content, on writing. And, I'm working on a project right now, and I love that. And she looked at me and she said, would you have ever thought in a million years that statement would have come out of your mouth? And I said, well, now that you say it, no. Because, 12, 13 years ago, I would have said, you're crazy.
Yeah.
If you would have told me what I'm doing now, which is I'm convinced is why oftentimes God doesn't let us see the big picture.
Yep.
But we're here. We were talking in the prayer, or I said in the prayer before we started that, let us have a good time in this process. And I have a ball here each week. And
we do.
I'm just so thankful that not only to our Run Club members, to our sponsors, our supporters, that you and I are able to sit here and do this for the going on the fourth year now. So to everybody listening, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, let me talk about a post from this week. It's from Mike Powers. There's a guy that's been around the
long time
ministry for a little while as well. And so he said, it's now been a couple of weeks since my son and I finished our 4 trail race series. I previously never been interested in running trails. I know there are runners out there that love running trails. I just want to say to all trail runners, I completely admire and respect you. Trail running is hard. It is much harder than running a mile on a trail than in the woods than on the road. I run a lot, and I felt sore after each race. I know I'm not fast. I will never be fast. However, I run because I love it. Instead of focusing on being fast, I want to challenge myself to new things. So I signed up and finished 4 trail races, every race longer than the previous race. Last year, I made a goal of running at least 1 mile or more every day in 2022. I completed that goal. This year, I'm making new goals. I can now call myself a trail runner. I think it is important for everyone to challenge themselves. It is important to try new things. We only grow during adversity and being out of our comfort zone. This is when we learn and grow the most. Not much growth happens within our comfort zones. I want to challenge you all to try something new in 2023. Do something you never thought you would do or thought you could do. You may surprise yourself. For those that may want to start running, here are some running challenges to try. If you do accept my challenge, would you comment below or contact me and let me know what new thing you're doing to challenge yourself? And he puts up this list. It's got 10 different 30-day running challenges that includes complete a streak, negative split every run, plank after every run, set a mile PR, run 5 times every week, increase mileage by 10% each week, set a 5K PR, run on a trail 2 times every week, complete every run in the morning, run a 5K, 10K, half marathon, and marathon in 1 month.
I was with him till that last one.
I don't know if I've ever done that. Probably not.
That would be pretty tough.
I know I have run a half marathon and 2 marathons in 1 month, though.
Really?
So, yeah. I've run marathons in back-to-back weeks.
Wow.
So
well, I've got some advice for Mike.
Yeah.
Because I have seen the pictures of him and his son doing these trail races, and it took me back a few years. I did a trail race with Lane one time. This is back when I was still a little faster than Lane, which shows you how long ago it was. But I will never forget, I caught my toe on a rock. And it was one of those falls where it takes you like 10 minutes to hit the ground.
Yeah.
And, I think I'm going to look up and I'm going to see my compassionate son standing there wondering if I'm okay. Well, when I look up, he's 100 yards in front of me looking back like it was almost like I had embarrassed him. He never even broke stride, and he just kept running. So, Mike, I think you're going to learn something about your son during this process. Number one, you're going to learn that he's getting faster.
Yeah.
And if you're like me, I was getting slower at the time. So cherish those moments when you can run together, because all the pictures I saw, they were together.
Yeah.
But that's not going to last much longer.
Not much longer. Yeah, that's true. I remember falling down on a trail one time, because I'm not a big fan of trails myself. And I remember falling down on a trail one time. And I was running with one of the college girls. Her name was Kay. And Kay stopped, fortunately. But when I got up, I had a really, really hard time running back to the car.
It hurts to hit the ground on the trails.
Yes. It turns out I stopped by the chiropractor's office right after that, and I had dislocated some ribs. He popped those ribs back in place, and whew, that is painful. Yeah. But anyway, it's funny because this was kind of a challenge for me. I mean, this wasn't, but the whole trail thing was back a few years ago. I was recruiting a girl who was a really good runner, and I promised her that if she came to run with us, that we would run on trails more often, because she loved to run on trails. And I've held true to that promise. So I myself have been on trails a lot more. But as a result, I'm a way better trail runner than I used to be. I don't fall down on trails anymore. Now, I may every once in a while. But
you'll be knocking on some wood right
not
there.
nearly as much as I did. At one time, I wouldn't go because there was a better than 50% chance I was going to wind up on the ground when I went. Now, my chances of falling on the ground are probably 5%.
Yeah.
And it's all because I've done more of it. These challenges, this whole idea of finding something that's a little outside of your comfort zone, maybe something that you don't even like to do, is really good for us and will make us better in the areas where we're a little weak.
Yeah. I mean, I've told you I like to keep things simple, but I started this little challenge back first week of January of pull-ups, push-ups, and sit-ups. Just that simple. And, you know, we've always talked about you can overcomplicate, especially strength work, but a lot of kind of workouts you can complicate. Well, just those three things. And I've kept consistent 3 days a week, and I can really tell it. And it was just a simple challenge that I saw, and I haven't quite completed. The challenge is it's like a pyramid. You go up the pyramid and back down. And when I first started, I couldn't get 20% of the way up the hill, and now I'm almost to the top, but I still got to work my way all the way back down. So but yeah, I love these types of challenge, thinking outside the box.
Yeah.
Well,
my challenge for myself this year is to run 3,000 miles this year, and right now I'm a pretty good ways behind because I've had a real difficult time in the last month. After that marathon, you know, something, I don't think it was the marathon. I think the marathon coincided with a sickness that I had, and I just haven't been right since. Yeah. And so I think I had a pretty good run yesterday, so I think maybe I'm coming out of it. Maybe I'll be able to make up for those lost miles I lost in January and February. Who knows? We'll see. I'll do what I can.
Miles, that's a lot of miles.
Yeah. It's about, I think it's 57 miles a week. So when you think about 57 miles a week, you know, you think, well, 57 miles sounds like a good bit, but, you know, it's not that much. But then when you think about it every single week, then it becomes a lot.
It's kind of like this Bible in a year.
Yeah.
You can't let up.
That's exactly right. Yeah. It's funny. We
think, oh, I'm ahead, and all of a sudden, whoa, I'm behind.
We started this podcast today, and we had to restart it because I had the wrong intro. Because I've been doing a different intro for that, and it just threw me completely off. And it's but it's good.
You're drinking out of a fire hydrant right now, is what you're saying.
Yes, and of course it's track season at the same time, and I've got today I'm trying to get some of that stuff caught up, and I've got track people just peppering me with text messages saying, "What am I running?" and what blah, blah, and I'm just like, hold on, I'll get to you, I promise.
Sounds like you need to find time to do nothing.
Just like you always say, right? All right. Hey, we got a trivia question for last week. It was a very simple one. We talked about how we had this conversation with Alan Webb, and that he had run 3:46 for the mile in 2007, which is still the American record. And the question was, how fast is 3:46 per 100 meters? Because 100 meters, you know, that's a sprint. That's a short distance. And so, then I followed it up by saying, once you figure that out, go out and try to run 100 meters at that pace. And it turns out that it's just over 14 seconds per 100 meters. That's a pretty quick 100 meters. Just to give you an idea on how fast 100 meters is, if you're running at 6-minute pace, which is a pretty fast pace, right? If you're running at 6-minute pace, that's 22.37 seconds per 100 meters. If you're running at 5-minute pace, which most people can't do at all, it's 18.65 per seconds per 100. And so 14 seconds per 100 meters is really, really fast. Right now, the school record, now we don't have any, we just have a couple of sprinters. We've never had a really, really good sprinter at Dalton State. Right now, our school record is just right at 14 seconds. So, and he did that for the mile.
Oh, so that was a guy? Oh, no, you're saying one of the girls.
One of the girls. Okay. Yeah. So I think I might be able to run 14 seconds per 100 meters for 200 meters, maybe right now. I probably stand a better job of doing it for 200 than I do for 100, to be honest with you.
Get you up to speed.
Yeah. When you get older, it takes a little longer to get up to full speed.
Well, I didn't know. This is a little bit of trivia, but I didn't know until Lane said it, and then you confirmed it. Because even when Lane said it, I didn't quite believe it. But then you confirmed it, so I guess I believe it now. But we were talking about the 100-meter records and all this the other day, and he said, the fastest 100 meters run are actually the back half of a 200-meter. And he said it was because you don't have coming off the blocks and all that. And that's kind of mind-boggling.
That's actually not true, though.
Really? I thought you said it was true.
The way you put it.
How did I put it?
The fastest 100 meters are actually the last 100 meters of a 4x100 meter relay. That's actually faster than the 4x2.
Well, if that was
for the same reason.
He was saying
yes, the 200
the back half of a 200 is faster than 100 meters.
Yes.
Yeah. And so that's it shows you how much the takeoff slows people down.
Yep, and how important it is.
I guess it's like it's the same thing in a swim.
Yeah.
Except it's in reverse on the swim.
Yeah. That's what drives me crazy too. As a coach, I coach kids, and let's say a kid runs 14 seconds flat for 100 meters, right? Well, technically they should be able to run 28 seconds flat for 200. And so many times they can run 14 seconds for 100, and then they run 32 seconds for the 200. I'm like, it's just you just got to get that in your mind. You just got to keep it going.
Yeah, because they don't believe it, and therefore they don't believe they can do it.
That's right.
But once I guess you show them the data, and they're like, oh,
yeah,
okay,
yeah.
But trying to get a 18, 19, 20-year-old to believe you, that's the hard part.
Yes, it is. Well, I wonder if anybody went out and tried to run 14 seconds for 100 meters after this.
I hope they filmed it and send us the video.
That would be great. You remember that time that
we'll post it.
Yeah, we would. Remember that time we had a triathlon practice, and at the end of the practice we had the kids running all out 100 meters, and one of them kind of challenged me. And you know how I am. I can't back down to a challenge, and so I decided to do it. And I hadn't warmed up or anything, and that was the biggest mistake. Oh my goodness!
I knew that was coming too. When I saw you get up, I was like, "Oh, this is not going to be." Especially, one, they're kids, and two, you're just not having warmed up. And you were going against everything we had instilled in those kids' mind. You got to warm up, you got to stretch, all this stuff before you run hard. Hey, Dean, I bet I can outrun you. Okay, line up.
And I proved we were right.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, that's funny. All right. Hey, we got the Run for God 5K weekend coming up, right?
Coming up quick here in just a few weeks. And again, if you're not signed up and you're not registered, we need to know who's coming. So you can go to runforgod.com/calendar and see all the events on there. But you can also see where you can go on and get your tickets for the banquet. By now, we have already sent out the codes. If you haven't gotten your code, send an email to Holly at runforgod.com. She'll get you your code for your free race. But yeah, it's going to be an incredible weekend. We were up in Cohutta on Friday night and just kind of scoping things out. And we're going to do Friday night up there in Cohutta. You can get the pizza place or the Red Wolf Grill, and I don't know. It's going to be a cool evening, cool weekend.
Yeah,
we're going to have the banquet Saturday night, the race Saturday morning, worship Sunday morning, and just kind of a no structure hangout on Friday night. But if you're part of a run club, part of this run club, and you want to experience it to the full. I just had a lunch with one of our other sponsors just a little while ago, Brandon Combs, and because I was inviting him. We invite our sponsors now to the Run Club banquet, and I said, if you want to experience the heart of Run Club, be part of that weekend
for sure.
And because it's special.
Yeah,
it really is.
It really is.
You know that moment when you're running and you settle into that perfect pace, and then the next song comes on? Don't let that happen again. With the new J Radio, you can trust us to make sure that the next song in your playlist will help you keep up that pace. Check out the Radioactive station on J Radio for all different genres of workout music handpicked for you while you run. Start listening now at jradio.com.
All right, we're back, and we still need stories. This is like a never-ending thing. This is episode 157, so we have shared 100. Well, a little less than that because we've had some other things going on, but for the most part, we've shared 150 stories.
Yeah.
And so they have to keep coming. You can't slow down
because they're constantly being written. We know that.
That's right. And there's a whole bunch of them right now residing in a particular area. And that's in people's heads. Mm-hmm. And all they got to do is pull it out and put it on the paper and send it to us.
You don't even got to spell correctly.
That's true. Because we'll fix that. That's no problem.
Even if it's spelled wrong, we may mispronounce it wrong. I mean, even if it's spelled right, we may mispronounce it. So
it's a really good chance of that. All right. Hey, remember when you were in school, they always asked about our heroes. Who's your hero? And you'd share. My hero is, and you'd be whatever. I just remember that being a big thing when I was in school. Maybe it wasn't. That probably isn't that way today. It's probably today they're probably scared to say. School has changed a little since my day. But there's always somebody to look up to, and somebody to aspire to, and that was usually who we called our hero. Of course, as followers of Christ, our standard should always be Jesus, no matter what. That is the standard for all of us. And I remember back then, even before I really started going to church, I remember hearing kids talk about that and not understand what they meant about it. Mm-hmm. It's interesting because I never thought about that from the standpoint of what a witness that was for those kids to do that. But anyway, a lot of people, runners, for example, they look at Steve Prefontaine and they think, man, I want to be like Steve Prefontaine because he's such a, he was known for being so gutsy and running so hard. And a lot of people that are competitive want to believe that they can run harder than anybody else can, Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of people like that. But I want to say this, that right now in our world, there's a lot of people out there who are, let's just say the people they're following are not good examples. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of that out there now. And it seems like the people who are, it used to be when I was a kid, the most popular and most prevalent people that people wanted to follow, they were most of the time pretty good role models. Mm-hmm. They may not have been Christian, but they're good role models. Mm-hmm. Now that's changed so much. There's some really, really bad role models out there for people to follow. And here's why I think that is. I think it's because good role models are boring now.
You took the words right out of my mouth. I was going to say they're not flashy.
Yeah. I mean, I think of Warren Buffett. Right. If you're an investor, right, and you want to invest your money, do you want to do it because Warren Buffett's whole thing is
boring.
Yeah, it's the most boring investing you can possibly do. Yeah. Put your money somewhere and let it sit there for a long time. Yeah, and nobody wants to be boring. Isn't that sad? But that's the truth, isn't it?
It's so funny you say that. I told you right before this podcast came on. I think it's biblical the way we've got to look at this, because the Bible says don't yoke yourself with unbelievers, and we think of that in the context of marriage a lot of times. But yoking is business. Anything where you're binding yourself together with somebody in any way. And I used the example of, or I was thinking of the example this morning with our sponsors. Mm-hmm. Every week we come on here and we talk about a sponsor, and I'm very careful not to. If somebody I didn't know came to me and said, "I want to sponsor Run for God," we're not just going to accept them. It's not a hard vetting process. But like this morning, we had a friend of mine, Hunter Williams. Mm-hmm. He recommended that I reach out to a specific company and to get them on board as a sponsor. Well, before I ever made a phone call, I went and I patroned that business this morning.
Yeah.
And I sat in their office and I just watched. Because I want to see, how do they treat their employees? How do they treat their customers? They do a great job at marketing, and it from all exterior appearances, they're a great company. And the flashiness of this world is what attracts us.
Yep.
But we've got to move beyond that flash and really get inside. And it's the reason I went and sat down and just watched, because the signs and the bumper stickers can all say one thing, but if you're not careful, you could yoke yourself with people that can damage your testimony and not even realize it until it's too late. And so yeah, I don't know where you're going with that, but you're dead on in your thoughts that oftentimes you need to get down to the boring parts.
You do.
Before attaching yourself to somebody, if that makes sense.
And sometimes the stuff that's really worthwhile to follow, the examples that we have to follow, are much uglier and grittier. And I'll give you a good example. A couple of weeks ago, we talked about Jerry Siegler's story and how she couldn't sleep at night. That's not a pretty picture. The idea of not being able to sleep because you're in such pain, and then the pain of that race was just exhausting. But that was such a great picture of what putting your faith in something can do, and is a great example to follow, but it's not an easy one to follow, and it's not a fun one to follow.
Well, think about most things that we come in contact with every day. The same rule applies. I mean, you mentioned investing. I mean, the best investment advice is boring. I mean, Warren Buffett nailed it. You put money in something consistently every month, every week, whenever it is, and you let it sit there for a year. I mean, so that's one. Think about training for a marathon. I mean, everybody loves the glitz and the glamour of the race day photos, but what led up to that? A lot of boredom, a lot of consistent, mundane grind. Think about our walk with Christ. I mean, we have to go through the valleys and the mess sometimes to get to those peaks, and so that's why we always caution about social media.
Yep.
You know, we see the exciting in investing. You'll see that. You'll see advertisements for that. You'll see exciting church services and things that get you pumped up for your walk with Christ. You'll see exciting marathon finishes, but behind all those things is a grind.
Yep.
And we need to condition ourselves to be up for that grind.
Yep.
Or else we'll never make it to those mountaintops.
Well said. Well, this week's story is about the idea that people are watching what we do, and as we watch other people, it should be obvious that people are watching us. And this one comes from Jan Klemp, and it's called People Are Watching. In 2019, I set a goal to run 1,000 miles. After seeing me reach that goal, my son, John, who was not a runner, decided that he would run 365 miles in 2020. He almost doubled that goal and found he actually enjoyed running. The next year, John ran his first race. It was a half marathon, which he finished in 1 hour, 40 minutes. I was impressed by how well he did and told him I thought he could run a marathon. He didn't think so. That same year, I joined the Couch to Marathon Challenge and trained to run my first marathon. I completed the Madison Marathon in November 2021 at the age of 58. November in Wisconsin is cold. I battled snow flurries, frigid winds, and a tough course with plenty of hills. It was a great experience.
I love that.
I do too. I returned to the Madison Marathon the next year, but this time as a spectator to cheer on my son. He finished that race in 3.5 hours. This is what John wrote on Facebook. Well, I ran the Madison Marathon today. About this time last year, I told my mom that there was no way I'd ever run one because that's something crazy people do. Then she ran Madison and inspired me to do the same. It wasn't easy, but I ran a race I'm proud of. Huge shout out to my wife, my sister, and my mom for being the best support team. I couldn't have done it without you. That same day, John asked me to pray over a personal situation in his life. He stated that he needed the power of prayer. It meant so much to me that he doesn't see me as a mom who runs, but as a mom who prays. I have role models of my own. In running and faith, as a teenager, I saw my dad lace up his shoes and go running in the dead of winter. He was my prayer warrior too, and shared how he was praying for me through difficult times in my life. I also had an older coworker who shared the love of Jesus with me regularly and prayed with me through struggles. These days I am uplifted by spending time weekly with my Bible study group. In running, I'm inspired when I read about runners who have overcome adversity. It gives me hope and a drive to achieve more. I'm also inspired by runners in my own community, such as friends I've made in the Moms Run This Town group. These ladies get up before 5 in the morning to run because they are busy raising their families. They are crushing their goals, running 10Ks, half marathons, marathons, and ultra distances. I am the older runner in the group who encourages others to keep going. I've had students that I've trained in my job as an occupational therapist who have told me they are setting goals to run half marathons after seeing my success as an older runner. Some have seen my faith too and thanked me for pointing them back to Jesus. So, folks, remember that often we think what we do doesn't make any difference, but people are watching and God is watching. After John ran the marathon, my 17-year-old daughter asked if she could start running with me, just a mile or two once in a while. Well, I can see where this is going.
So two phrases. Crazy is contagious.
I like that.
Obviously.
Yeah.
And then from the wise lady, Rachel Cruz, who, by the way, I sent that podcast to her this morning.
Is that right? All
we
right.
kind of called her out on the half marathon. We'll see if she responds. But she always says with kids, more is caught than taught. Yep. And that's so true. Our kids are watching.
Yep.
We can say things all we want, but they're watching what we do. And this is just an incredible example of that. And to think that grown son is still learning valuable lessons from mom. That's awesome.
It is pretty awesome. And I know just how she feels about this idea that he sees her as more than just this mom who runs, but somebody who prays too. When my kids call me and ask for life advice, that they see value in asking dad's opinion about that, and my kids they're over 30 years old, they're up there. But they still see value in it. And, it makes you feel like you did something right.
Sure.
When they were younger. Well, I remember talking about people watching and what a difference it makes knowing people are watching. I remember the one time when I was at the track. I may have shared this on here one time a long time ago, but I was at the track and I was doing a long track workout. It was 10 times 1 mile with a 400 jog in between each mile. And it's, what is that?
It's a long way.
That's for 50 laps on the track. And so it's a lot of laps. And so I'm running along and I've gotten in, 3 miles or so, and I'm suffering. And I'm like, this is not working out well. I don't know if I'm even going to finish this workout. Well, then all of a sudden a bus pulls up and a bunch of middle schoolers get out and they sit in the stands of the football stadium that's right there by the track. They're all sitting there watching me run. What else are they going to do? I mean, they're talking, I'm sure, but out of the corner of their eye, they're seeing this guy that's running around this track.
They're just waiting on this old guy to crash and burn.
Yes. But you know what happened? All of a sudden, I felt more energized. I knew people were watching. And it makes such a difference when we know people are watching us. And I think, what if we looked at everything we did like I looked at that moment when those kids sat down in those bleachers? Wouldn't it make a difference in how we acted, how we interacted with people, what we said, how we said it? It would make a huge difference. And if we could, what else? If we could figure out somehow to get that same, if we could feel like there's somebody looking over our shoulder when we're on social media, that would be a big help, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Because that's where we get ourselves in trouble more often than not, is that anonymity of typing things in on social media or wherever. But anyway, I just think everything could be different if we always looked at the fact that people are watching.
It's kind of that Cleveland Highway syndrome. I always say when I run up and down Cleveland Highway, there's no way I'm going to stop and walk on Cleveland Highway because, 40% of the cars that drive by, I know who they are, and They know who I am. And same thing with you. You know everybody. So you've got that. But the problem is you don't know which one.
That's right.
Is one of those people that know you. So any one of those 10,000 cars that drive by you could be somebody you know. And I'll be darned if I'm going to be walking during that. So
that's right.
And sometimes it's good to put yourself in those situations. You know, you had middle schoolers show up. Well, I've scheduled things when people are going to be there. I know they're going to. And that just happened to be the day that I still burned like a bonfire out on the track, but you
gave yourself the best chance.
I did. That day it just wasn't enough.
Proverbs 27 says, "When a man walks in integrity and justice, happy are his children after him." Man, I'll tell you what, that word integrity, gosh, that is such a word these days that it just seems a lot different than it used to, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't want to get political or anything, but we've gotten to the point where it's really, really hard to trust almost anything now. Mm-hmm. I think if we've learned anything over the last couple of years is we can't trust what the news tells us. We can't trust what scientists the experts are not right in a lot of cases, and it's really frustrating. I don't know if we put more faith in those things than we should have in the past, and it's just now we're learning that a lot of these things are wrong, or they're just wrong more often now. But whatever it is, integrity is important, and I think the definition of integrity is this: it's steadfast adherence to a strict moral or ethical code. And this is what I want to say about that. The problem is that today everybody has their own moral code. Mm-hmm. And therefore there's no such thing as a strict moral code if it's all different, right? Mm-hmm. A strict moral code means there is a truth. There is a moral code. Well, there is a moral code. Mm-hmm. And it's found in the Bible, and it's very descriptive. It's very definite. There's no question in most cases what that moral code is, and we have a strict moral code, and that's what integrity is. Integrity means following what's in the Bible to me, but integrity means if you say you're going to do it, you do it. If and if you do make a mistake, this is the part that bothers me the most about some of the so-called experts these days is, if I make a mistake, because you and I have done it before, I'm talking to you and I make a mistake. Well, if I make a mistake and I realize it, first thing I'm going to do is call you or send you an email or say, hey, I messed up on this. That was not accurate. I'm so sorry. I messed up. We don't hear that. Mm-hmm. That's integrity, is going back and righting a wrong that you caused. And I saw it's, and again, it's a political thing, but I saw somebody who is, we got two separate sides of the aisle. I saw an article recently from somebody on the opposite side of the aisle from where I generally fall that said, man, I realized that I've been lied to and things have been bad and it's not been what it's been portrayed to be. And it was refreshing to read that, because it was somebody that was integrity. I may not agree with that person on a lot of their politics, but that was integrity saying, hey, there's some areas where we can find some agreement.
Yeah, I think I've mentioned on here, right now I'm reading the Don't Give the Enemy a Seat at Your Table. And I just got done reading the Screw Tape Letters. Yeah. And both of them kind of hit on this, that the point being that probably the devil's sneakiest move is get us justifying things. I'm going to do this because I had a bad day, or I'm going to do this because whatever it is. And we begin to justify sin, or we begin to blur the lines or get in that gray area. And we've talked on here recently about there is no gray area. Anytime you start to justify, you're slipping to the black. Mm-hmm. This is one of the devil's greatest tricks. We talked on here a few weeks back, I think, about taxes. Your accountant will tell you You're kind of getting in the gray area though. There, no, you're not. If it's not right, it's wrong.
Right.
Period. But as a society, we've done this on our taxes. We've done this on, something as dumb as sharing a Netflix password with your neighbor. Those are the little things that we say. And in full disclosure, I did this up until just a few months ago. I had my neighbor's Netflix password.
Yeah.
Is that the end of the world? No. Is it wrong? Yes.
Yeah.
It was wrong. Shouldn't have done it. But we allow ourselves to, it's just an internet password. What's the big deal?
Right.
We'll answer for that. Now, is God, when I get to heaven, going to say, you borrowed somebody's Netflix password? I don't know. I'm not going to say no, because that is wrong. Therefore, that is a sin. Therefore, the Bible says I'm going to give an account for all my wrongdoing. So if he gets down to that, I'm going to be standing there a while.
That's what I was going to say. We're in for long meetings.
But Scripture's clear.
Yeah.
And so, you're right. Integrity is biblical. Walking in integrity, walking with upright, walking to where our testimony is not blemished is biblical.
Yeah.
And we need to do everything we can. And man, God's going to wear me out this afternoon, I'm sure. All the way down to the internet password. We don't need to give anybody any kind of ammunition to come after us, because in the day we live in now, something as small as sharing a Netflix password has the potential for just being blown way out of proportion.
That is true.
Why give the enemy that foothold?
That is true. And that's where our problem lies, because back in the early days of our country, I remember the story of Benjamin Franklin, who was not a Christian. Benjamin Franklin was what they called a deist in the time, and he was not a Christian. But what he did know was he knew that Christian principle was a good thing, even though he wasn't a Christian. And when the Continental Congress got stuck and didn't know what to do, and that if it looked like they were at an impasse, they were not going to get the Constitution written. And what did Benjamin Franklin do? The guy that was not a Christian said, hey, why aren't we praying about this? And they prayed. And they got past that impasse. And the truth is that as Christians, we all need to be living out the truth. We all need to be not sharing our passwords and then doing those things that are just on the fringes, because as this story says, people are watching. And if it looks like we are people of high integrity, then what's going to happen is people are going to see that and see the value in it. But they're not going to see the value in it if we look like everybody else. And there's poll after poll that shows that in a lot of cases, Christians are no different than the rest of the world. And so we've got to be better than that, for sure. Another passage, 1 Corinthians 15:58 says, therefore, my beloved brothers, be firm, steadfast, always fully devoted to the work of the Lord, knowing that in the Lord your labor is not in vain. And she follows it by saying, I love the idea that we run for God. Yeah, well, we know this, but it doesn't always make it easy, right? Because a lot of times we're doing things and we don't see an immediate return for it. Running is the classic example.
Sure.
There is no immediate return on running. That first day of running 60 seconds for a lot of people is really hard. And they don't see the I'm going to run a half marathon at some point, right? Because at that point in time, they can't run for 60 seconds. But over time, it makes a difference.
Well, we talked about it at the outset of this. It's we want to get to that Instagram moment.
That's right.
But there's a lot of grind before that, and that's what this verse is referring to. Be firm and be steadfast. This isn't talking about the day we walk into heaven. That's the Instagram shot right there. Yep. It's everything leading up to that. It's hard.
Yep. And the idea, for an example, one of these things I know that frustrates all of us is if we share Christ with somebody and then they reject Christ in that case. That's hurtful. You know, it really bothers us, and we want to do something, and we want to feel like sometimes we might walk away feeling like I wasted my time, but that's not a waste of time, because we don't know what's going to happen and how God's going to use that down the road, and we may never see how God's going to use that down the road. You know, the I don't know how many times we've all seen a situation where you did something for somebody at one time, and you didn't think anything more about it. And then years later, somebody comes back and says, you know, this thing you did for me that one time that you completely forgot about, I really appreciate it. It really made a difference in my life. It happens all the time. So why would we think that sharing Christ with somebody is any different? You know, the old marketing rule that people need to see or hear something 7 times before they make a purchase. Well, the same thing happens a lot of times for people when you share Christ, and maybe you're the 6th time. And maybe that next time that somebody shares with them might not be you,
right?
But maybe that next time, that's when they latch on and understand. Passage from Matthew 28:19 through 20 says, "Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you, and behold, I am with you always until the end of the age." The Great Commission.
Pretty straightforward.
Yeah. We were talking about this in relation to, in our Sunday school class, we were talking about education. And we were talking about this in relation to education. We were talking about something about, I don't know if you've ever heard this, the Jewish people, they have this, what's it called? Sukkot, I think it's called. Yeah. And you know what that is? These Jewish families, and if people are out there and they know this, and I get it a little bit wrong, please excuse me, but I think I'm getting the idea right. Okay, so on Sukkot, what the Jewish families do is they go out and they build a booth, and they call it a booth, and it's like a little hut, and it actually has to have a space in the ceiling where they can see the stars through it. And their family goes out and stays, basically camps, in this booth. And in that time, there's no television, there's no it's just a family that sits in this booth. And the idea is that the booth is like, it's 3-sided, and it's the idea is that the walls of the booth are God's arms wrapped around you. And they share with their kids this idea of, they share with their kids the Exodus story and what God did for the Israelites through the Exodus story. And it's a way of passing on a worldview to their kids. How awesome is that? And they call them, what do they call them? I had the word, sukkah is what this booth is called. It's called a sukkah, it's very interesting. But here's the thing. Our worldview is very important. And we need to be passing along our worldview. And I thought about that because, again, we were just talking about it, but I thought about it because how seriously we take this verse really describes our worldview and how much we believe in what the pages of the Bible say.
You mentioned this soku, or however you pronounce it. It kind of reminds me of a Seder, which is another Jewish tradition that you get together. I think it's sometime around Christmas, where you get together and they tell the story of the Exodus as well. I've mentioned Eli, who I do some business with. Yeah. I went to a Seder at his house, and it was fascinating. But one thing that the Jewish people do well is exactly what you're talking about here. They pass on these stories to their families, and they're very diligent about doing that. And one thing that I think that they look at us negatively in our culture is, everybody wants to be their kids' best friends nowadays, and they don't want to preach, and I'm using air quotes, to their kids. We should be preaching to our kids.
Yes,
we should be passing along. I mean, the Jewish tradition, they pass on the Old Testament, but we need to be passing the gospel on to our kids. Number one, making sure that they know it and they understand it. Obviously, we can't we can't do anything about whether they accept it or not. That's God's job, but we need to be doing everything we can to equip them.
Yep.
And that's not as prevalent in our culture today, and that it is in the Jewish culture still, because I've seen it firsthand, and it was so. I don't know the right word to describe it when we went to the Seder at Eli, because Eli is a very business person. I mean, he is all business, most days of the week. But at this, we had I've got it sitting right up there, the little thing that goes on your head. We had those on. Yarmulke. Yeah. But he went into full on. You can tell he does this a lot. Mm-hmm. Full on storytelling, and was just theatrical and dramatic. It was really a cool thing to see. If you've never been part of one, especially if you ever get invited to one, go to it. Yeah, it's very eye opening because the story. We all know the story. Yeah. We have a continuation of the story, but it's fascinating, and it's something that we can learn a lot from about the passing things on from generation to generation, which is an art is kind of dying in our culture.
We have definitely gotten watered down. And here's the problem. The biggest problem is that, and this is, again, we were talking this past weekend about the worldview and as it relates to education. The truth is that worldviews are getting passed along.
Sure.
Make no mistake.
Yeah.
And if we don't pass along to our kids the correct worldview, the biblical worldview, they're going to learn a different worldview.
Right.
And it's very important for them. And that's why with the Jewish people, that's why they tell that story so many times, is because they want to make sure that's the prevalent story in their mind. And that's what we should be doing
think
as well.
About, they had scrolls and things like that, but think about the most influential way that Scripture has been passed down for 2,000 years.
Yep.
Yes, it was written in scrolls, but so much of it was told. It was the spoken word, event after event after event, and that's what's got us to where we are. And if we don't watch it, you use the word watered down. That's probably the best term because, the evil one, he'll take parts of it, and then he'll mix his part in. And if we're not constantly pointing back to Scripture and really putting the litmus test to it with Scripture, it will get just what you said, watered down.
Yep, for sure. A question. What or who inspired you to become a runner?
A dare. That's how I started.
That's awesome. That's funny. Yeah. Well, I just started running. I think I've told this story before. I started running when we lived in a big neighborhood, and I used to run in front of my mother's car to the post office that was about a half mile away from the house.
I need to pull that Dean's Thoughts episode out.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. Maybe I'll throw it in this video.
Have little Dean.
Yeah. But I always loved to run, and then the inspiration to love and continue running probably came from my high school coach. He loved running so much. And I've talked about him before.
Still loves running.
Yes, he's run every day. When I say this, it always freaks me out as much as it does anybody else who's listening. The last day he did not run, Richard Nixon was president. When you say that, it's like that. You don't have to say number of years. Yeah. Just say that. And it's like,
a long time.
Oh my goodness, that's a long time. But he loves running. And he passed along that love of running, not just to me, but to a lot of the runners that ran for him. And I just think about some of the guys, one of the guys on my cross-country team just coached a guy who led the Foot Locker championships for most of the race this past year. Another guy is coaching at the Division I level at Georgia Tech. There's just a lot of... And it's because he passed it on to us, that love. Another question, who inspires you in your Christian faith?
Every time I'm asked this question, the same person pops into my mind. And honestly, with the exception of probably 2 or 3 times, I really haven't seen this person in 15 years. He lives on the other side of the town. He goes to a church that Holly and I went to when we got married. It was the church she grew up in, but a gentleman by the name of Larry Anderson. Larry is, like I said, I've seen him every now and then around town, but Larry was one of those guys in our church. He helped in the youth group when I was in the youth there. He was around at the time I got saved. And he was just one of those, he didn't say a lot. You could tell he was a man of very deep convictions. Talking about stories, when we would go like on campouts and stuff, he was the story guy. He was the older guy that really sat everybody down and told these stories. He was a motorcycle mechanic. He was one of those jack of all trades, knew how to do everything, but he was a man of very few words.
Yeah.
But when he spoke, you listened.
Yeah.
And he always had a way of pointing you to Christ, even if he never said the word Jesus.
Yeah.
And he's, the past few times I've seen him, he's still that way.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I think he's just one of those that really, whether he knows it or not, set me on the right heading at a time that I really needed it the most.
It goes back to what I was saying a little bit earlier. He probably doesn't even recognize that or realize that.
He doesn't.
Yeah.
He doesn't. Because I mean, I've said that before, but I don't know that I've ever said that to him. Maybe I should.
Yeah.
Maybe. I think I do. I do need to tell him that.
I'll give a shout out to another guy who lives here. He lives in Chatsworth. His name's John Bagley. I think you know John. John
kind of the same personality.
Yes. Yeah. You know, he's a little bit like us in that he's a doer. He's always wanting to do things and always wanting to help people. But I never hear John ever say anything negative about anybody at all. And he always brings every conversation back to Christ. And he was he has no idea how much of an inspiration he was to me at the time. He was our pastor at our church for a little while. He has no idea how much, and it wasn't in any one thing that he ever said. It was in the way he carried himself, and his general demeanor was something that if I was going to be like somebody else, that's the guy I want to be like, because he is the guy to me that whose walk seems as close to God as anybody I know. And
not flashy.
Nope.
It's boring.
Yep.
We've already talked about
that's
this,
right.
and that's the best walk to have. Is a nice. Boring is the wrong word, I guess, in this context, but you understand my point. We don't. You don't want the highs and the lows of your walk with Christ. You want it to be steady.
Yep.
And I think that's the way John and Larry both live their life.
And a couple other people, Debbie really does wonders for me. She keeps me centered so well. She's always, she's another one that just pulls everything back to where it needs to be. When I get wild, she yanks me back and says, "Get away from the edge there, buddy." You know, and that's so important for me. God definitely sent her my way for a reason. And then there's a guy I listen to on a podcast occasionally who is, I want to say I don't know if he's Catholic or I'm not sure. But he has a different way of looking at things, and he always looks at things just a little bit different than everybody else. And I really, really like people like that. And that guy really helps me to go, because I'm convinced that, when Jesus came, everybody got him wrong. Right? Everybody had the wrong idea on who Jesus was going to be. Now, I know we know who Jesus is now, but I'm convinced that when everything is revealed, when we go to heaven and everything is revealed to us, it's not going to be anything like what we think. And that's why I like to listen to people who have a little bit different take on things, because we get so ingrained on what we think things are or are going to be. And I think that now there's a lot of things that are black and white. Please don't hear me say that I think there's something in the Bible that isn't in the Bible or anything like that. But I think we've got to be open to the idea that Jesus is way more than the box we put him into. And that's I don't know. That's why I like to listen to people like that. Last question. Are you sharing the gospel on a regular basis? Well, now, Jan, you are stepping on some toes.
I like to. The question is, are you sharing the gospel on a regular basis? The question is not, are you sharing the gospel enough? I think the answer to the question, are you sharing the gospel on a regular basis? I like to think we are.
Yeah.
I like to think we're doing it on a regular basis. Now, are we doing enough? We're never doing enough. I would like to do more. I've got a prayer rock behind me that, one of my prayers is give me the opportunities to share the gospel.
Yeah.
And I think too many times the opportunities are there. I think he's answering my prayer. But I need to be looking at that rock more.
Yeah.
Because the opportunities are always there.
Yep.
Do you struggle with motivation to exercise? Are you looking for something that will challenge you and inspire and motivate you? The Run for God Run Club is just what you need to get off the couch and on your way to a fitter, healthier you. Stop trying to get into better shape and do it with the help and inspiration of thousands of others who are going through the same challenges you face. Whether you are participating in the Couch to Marathon Challenge or any of our other challenges, or you're just looking for a daily pick-me-up to get active, join the Run for God Run Club today. You can join for as little as 27 cents a day. So what are you waiting for? Get started today at runforgod.com.
All right, we're back. And there's a subject that's really touchy as it relates to running, but I thought I'd bring it up and hopefully do it in a sensitive enough way. And I bring it up because of something that happened recently, and it's the subject of weight and running. It's Eilish McColgan. I don't know if you know who that is. She's a British runner, and she's extremely thin. And so she's been picked on for years about how thin she is and that she must have some kind of a diet issue, that she must be starving herself, blah, blah, blah. Well, she just set a British record, and actually I think it's under the American record for the 10K. She ran like 30:01 or 30:02, something like that, something really fast. Anyway, but I bring it up because we've also heard about the opposite thing, right? We've heard about coaches who were fired because they brought up weight to a female athlete and it didn't go over well. And that's the other side of that coin. And there are certainly both sides to it. And the problem is, and the reason why these coaches wind up getting fired is because a lot of times when you start talking with people about their weight, they go to the other extreme, and that's way more dangerous. And so you got to be careful with that, because a lot of that has led to, and we know for a fact it's led to, what's her name?
It's on the tip of my tongue.
Eden Morris.
Oh, okay. I thought you were talking about.
Yeah, Eden Morris. She talks about that very candidly, about how
she was a softball player.
She was a softball player, and she got into eating disorders because she knew she felt like she needed to be lighter.
She was being shamed into it.
Yes. Yeah. And so we've got to be careful with that. Having said all that, though, weight is an important thing, right? And so we should focus on that to some degree. Obviously, being healthy is important, but I guess this is the thing about weight. You got to put good food in your system. We should look at food as fuel. We've talked about that a number of times. And I want you to think about this. If you are going to put gas in your car, you would not go into the convenience store right there by the gas station and buy a gallon of milk and then pour it into your gas tank, hoping it would work, because it ain't going to work. Well, why is it any different when we eat stuff that's not good for us? It's just like we're going to buy that milk and pouring it into our tank.
Yeah.
We're putting stuff in our body that's not good for us. And you know what? Here's the thing that I think is really stark. It's not hard not to go in there and buy that milk, right? But it seems to be so hard for us to avoid putting garbage in our body. Now, again, please don't hear me say we've got to be absolute and never put anything bad in our body, that kind of thing. That's not what I'm saying. But think about it like this. The more optimized your weight is, the better you're going to feel as a runner, as a walker, as whatever you're doing, just being alert in general. And so it's worth fueling your body properly, if for no other reason than life is just better in general.
Well, I think the thing about running, and I've said this many times, because we always warn people, especially when joining that very first 5K class, this is not the time to go on a crash diet. Because a lot of people, they go to extremes, they start a running program, and then they say, I'm just not going to eat for the next 12 weeks. Well, that is a recipe for disaster. But one thing that is great about running or exercise in general is you learn the cause and effect. I'm never going to tell somebody not to eat a cupcake. Mm-hmm. We don't do the diet thing around here. Mm-hmm. Nor do I think Eden does, and some of the other people we've had on, Spider. It's not really diet that we teach, but we try to teach, understand the cause and effect. Mm-hmm. If I want a cupcake right now, and I know I'm going to do a run in 1 hour from now, I understand the cause and effect. Yeah. I understand that cupcake is not going to feel good doing that run here in 1 hour. And I think running helps you. And for that reason, I think that people that join a fitness program like Run for God, the 5K challenge, any of our challenges, you tend to start losing weight because of that fact alone. It's not that you're going on a diet. It's you start understanding, oh, that Mexican lunch I had, like me and you did for a while. And I would get so mad at myself because we'd go run later on. And I'd be like, I feel horrible. And finally, after 8 weeks, we stopped going to eat Mexican for lunch. But I think that's the important thing to grasp when we start talking diet, which I'm not putting that label on it, but nutrition is once you start to understand that, yes, I'm allowed to eat this thing, and I may decide to go ahead and eat this thing, I understand that it may be like pouring a little bit of water in my gas tank.
Yeah.
I may spit and sputter for a little while. I'll get back. It's not going to derail me. But because of that, you start to notice these trends, and you start to notice the foods that do make you feel good when you go on that next run. And therefore, you start gravitating toward that. And because of that, you start to get healthier and you start to lose weight and all these types of things. But yes, joining not even if you don't join an exercise program, taking these draconian, TV diets is never a good thing. Yeah. Because you're right, food is fuel, and when you just cut the fuel out, you're going to run out of gas, and maybe even worse. I mean, you get in instances like Eden, where it can cause long-term effects. Yeah,
it strikes me that the problem a lot of times with what we eat and how our nutrition works is exactly what we were talking about earlier about delayed gratification. Mm-hmm. Because the truth is the reason why we eat the thing that's bad for us is because it gratifies us now.
Mexican food is my favorite.
Yeah, even though it's going to make us feel lousy later. Right. Whereas if we look at later and how we're going to feel later as being more important than how we feel now, we'd probably make different choices.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, it's a time for Dean's Thoughts, and that's a time when I share something that I've written about the intersection between running and faith. Well, we had an eventful trip home from South Dakota, and I think I learned something from it. So I wrote this thing called Patience is a Virtue. I will remember the 2023 NAIA Indoor Nationals for several reasons, but one of them has nothing to do with the track meet itself. Have you ever had one of those days where one after another things seem to go haywire? We had one of those days on the way home from South Dakota. When we arrived at the airport, everything looked fine. The status screens told us that our flight was on time and that we would get back into Chattanooga by 7:30 p.m. That would be enough time to spend a couple hours with my wife and our pets before going to bed for a full night's rest to begin a new week the next day. But as the time for boarding approached, the plane was late, just pulling into the gate. And that meant that we would be a little late as they took time to deplane and clean up the aircraft. We had a connecting flight in Dallas-Fort Worth, the second busiest airport in the world. The schedule called for exactly 1 hour between flights. The footprint of that airport was very large, and I began to hope that our arrival gate and departure gate were close together. I sat down in my seat 15 minutes after takeoff time. It looked like we would be about 30 minutes late. That would cut it close, but we could still make it if the gates were close together. If they weren't, we still had a chance because there was a reasonable chance the second flight would be delayed too. A late departure would give us the time we needed. But then we just sat there at the gate. I don't know why, but we just sat there for another 15 minutes. Now it was getting uncomfortably close. As we began to taxi out toward the runway, I thought, they can often make up 10 or 15 minutes in the air on a 2-hour flight. Hopefully, we would still be okay. But then the plane stopped, and we just sat there, getting uncomfortable as it seemed the air conditioning was not working. It was a far cry from the single-digit temperatures we had experienced in the past few days. We sat for another 15 minutes. Then I looked outside the window as they began to de-ice the wings. Another 15 minutes go by. Our chances were down to 0 if the plane to Chattanooga was on time. But maybe it would be late. The thing is, we didn't have a choice. I made the decision to just relax and be patient. Not a small accomplishment for me. We finally took off over an hour after we were scheduled to take off. I sat back, got a little work done, and just prayed that God would see us to our final destination. I tried in vain during the flight to pull up information on our connecting flight, but I had terrible difficulty with the airline app. 2 restarts of my phone didn't help much either. Towards the end of the flight, a flight attendant came by to see if anyone had questions. I told him our situation. He tapped on his device and said, "Thompson?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "You have already been rescheduled on another flight." Our new departure time would be a little over 4 hours later than our original flight. I thanked God that there was space on the same day flight and sat back and finished our flight knowing that we would have to hang out at the Dallas-Fort Worth airport for a few hours. I had the opportunity to work on my patience a little more. We found a great place to share a meal and some laughs in that airport. If we were going to be delayed, we could make the most of it. And we did. The plane took off on time and landed on time in Chattanooga. But when we pulled up to the gate, we had to sit behind another aircraft who was waiting for the ground crew to attend to their arrival. I only thought our delays were over. We sat for another 15 minutes waiting for the crew to finish the other plane. Finally, we pulled up to the gate, and then we sat there a little bit longer. It seemed that there was no agent at the gate, so we had to wait for one to arrive. At this point, I began to laugh out loud at the absurdity of it all. Did I happen to mention that did I happen to mention that I was sitting in the very last row by the window? So I was the last person off the plane. More waiting, more opportunity to practice my patience. We went down to the baggage claim area to collect our bags and waited. As the bags came out, the crowd dwindled as each of the waiting passengers collected their bags and left. The 2 ladies I was traveling with collected their bag, and I told them to go ahead and go on home. One of them had class in the morning, and it was after midnight at this point. And I waited. I went to the source of the conveyor to get my bag as soon as it came out, and then I was approached by an airport worker. "Are you looking for a bag? What does it look like?" I said, "It's a black backpack with tripods attached." He said he had it in the back and he would go retrieve it. As he went out the door, I looked around. It was just me and a guy working at one of the car rental places left in the building. More practice. He brought my bag, and what do you know? It was the right one. I took it and started to leave. Then I noticed that something was missing, but he had gone out the door. I went to the door, and it would not open. I banged on it, and there was no answer. After a long day, I still didn't have all I needed. At that point, I had no idea how to get back to the baggage claim workers. I just had to leave. More practice. But boy, was I happy to be home. This day wasn't the best day I've ever had, but it was far from the worst, too. Why? Because I didn't stress over the things I couldn't control. The truth is that I may have had a heart attack 10 years ago. God has really worked on my patience, but there is a walking lesson to learn here. I see many people who are always just looking forward to getting the run or the walk done. They're so focused on checking the task off the checklist that they dread the activity itself. On our trip home, I made the decision that I was traveling in good company and I would enjoy the experience no matter what it was. We laughed really hard at times. We had fun despite the circumstances. 10 years ago, I could not have enjoyed it because I would have been consumed with things I couldn't even control. Don't allow yourself to get wound up about the run you have to fit into your day. It may not be convenient. You may not feel well. You may be rushed to fit it in between two other things, but that's okay. You can't control time. And take it from me, when you try, it never ends well. No matter how hard it is, allow yourself to enjoy your journey. For me, a trip that would have been miserable a few years ago was downright enjoyable journey today, because I have realized I can't control everything around me. Charles Swindoll once said, "Life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you react to it." I have learned the deep truth of that saying over the past decade, and the bottom line is that God is in control. God created time. He's not surprised by anything that's going on, but I'm convinced he is interested in seeing how we react to our lack of control over circumstances and time. He wants us to rely on him, and sometimes we're forced to decide if we're going to rely on God or we're going to get impatient about something we can't even control. Whether you're thinking about running or anything else, try not to be so focused on the destination that you forget to enjoy the journey. Be patient, especially when you have no control over events happening around you. And I have found that focusing on God in those moments when tension rises can be so sweet, because he will often show us a different angle. What else explains the fact that I was laughing about something today that would have tied me in knots just a decade ago? It is all God. That's what happens when we focus on him instead of the things we can't control.
Man, that was a great story, Dean. I think this is where you and I are pretty much alike.
Yeah.
I think this is the area that he's worked on me the most, although I don't think I've come quite as far as you. Maybe I have. I don't know.
Probably further. You've seen me. Come on. Tell the truth.
You've seen me. But yeah, I mean, you're so right. Even when things are going right, I think this is where I've struggled a lot in the past. Even when things are going right, I'm so antsy to get to the next thing that I don't enjoy the place I'm at. And that's wrong.
Yeah.
It's wrong for everybody around you. It's like I'm so impatient to get that great seat in the restaurant. Then we get sat down and I get done eating and I'm so anxious to get out and leave. Everybody jokes. My father-in-law, Jerry, it's kind of a running joke now. When Jerry's done eating, Jerry stands.
Yeah.
And it don't matter if everybody else is. And so it's kind of a joke now, Jerry's standing. And so I'll stand up and my family will say, Jerry's standing. But yeah, I mean, this is an area that I still need to work on, of just enjoy where God's got you and the people he's got you around. That's the part that we so often overlook is you're sitting at the dinner table with the people that you love the most so many times.
Yeah.
And we're anxious to get on to the next thing.
Yeah.
And that's
guilty.
We shouldn't do that.
So guilty. And for whatever reason, God really impressed upon my heart on this trip. The two ladies I was with, I have so much deep respect for them, their family, and I just decided that if I was going to get upset, then they were going to have to pay the consequences of me being upset. And I thought that's not fair to them. Mm-mm. And it turned out so much better, not just for them, but for me as well. Sure. Because like I said, we sat in that airport and we ate and we laughed so hard. I don't remember what we were talking about, something, and laughed so hard. And it was a lot of fun. And, Catherine was one of those that was with me. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how much you know about Catherine and her barbs, but when she throws a barb out there, they're pretty pointed and they're pretty good. And she doesn't waste words.
And she's stone-faced when she does all that. Yeah. Yeah. I actually talked to Catherine last week at that track meet. That's the most I've ever talked to her.
Is it? Yeah.
And I really got to see a different side of her.
Yeah.
I think she was relaxed at that track meet and really got to know her a lot better and enjoyed talking to her.
Yeah, you got to see the side of her I talk about.
I guess I've never said 10 words to her before that. And I've known her for years now, but
Yeah.
Yeah, that was nice.
Well, I love the quote that I pointed to in here, Charles Swindoll's quote about life is, 90%, how you
10% what happens, 90% how you react.
Yeah. And it's that's just it's so true. There's no reason why. And I think about it in the context, again, of running. So many people, they just, like you're talking about, they want to check it off.
Yeah.
And I'm guilty myself of, let me just get it done and move on to the next thing. It's way more fun when we just sit back and we enjoy it and we realize that we get to do it, that we don't have to do it. Mm-hmm. And it makes a big difference. At Run for God, we care about more than just your exercise. We care about your relationship with God, and we believe that the music you listen to while you run can help you build your relationship with God. That's why we partner with J Radio. J Radio offers a variety of positive and Christian playlists to listen to while you run. You can find a playlist that I put together on the Run for God station on J Radio. All right, every week I share a reason why running or walking is so awesome. And this week, it can make your job better, or it can make you better at your job.
Sure.
By being a runner. Have you ever noticed that a lot of the top executives, a lot of our presidents, a lot of people are runners that are in top levels? Well, I think there's a reason for that. I think they go together. Mm-hmm. I think people who run tend to be more successful, and people who are more successful tend to run. And so that tells you that maybe, you're up for a big promotion soon. I don't know.
It's the structure, it's the dedication, it's the discipline. And the thing about it is, that's not just natural. It's something you can learn. So if you're not a runner, if maybe you are struggling at your job, become a runner. Yeah, it may get better because it's a learned thing.
Absolutely. Well, this story somebody posted this on our Run Club Facebook page. And I read the story, and I liked the story, and so I wanted to share the story. I know that not everybody will read a headline, and they don't always read the whole story, and so I thought we would share this story because it was that good. And it says, this woman ran a 5:17 mile while 9 months pregnant. Don't be afraid to change reality. And this lady's name is McKenna Myler. The story was written by Corrine Miller, and it's an interesting read. McKenna Myler went viral back in 2020 when she ran a mile in under 6 minutes while she was pregnant with her first child. So when she was 9 months pregnant with her second child, she decided to do it again. Only this time she did it faster. In February, the 30-year-old professional runner once again ran a race while heavily pregnant, completing her mile-long run in 5 minutes and 17 seconds, shaving 8 seconds off the 5:25 mile she ran in 2020 during her first pregnancy. Myler, who's due to give birth on March 15th, tells Yahoo Life that she can't imagine not running during pregnancy. A runner for ASICS since July 2021, Myler decided to run a race at 9 months pregnant again because she and her coach, Ryan Hall, who she hired at the beginning of her pregnancy, wanted to see how her training is progressing. The mile for my first pregnancy was an easy comparison, she says. Myler says she hadn't raced the mile in over a year, and so it was a little jarring when she did it at the Soka University indoor qualifier meet. I had to remember that running 4 laps has to hurt right away, or you're not going to run fast enough, she says. I ran too slow the first lap and then realized I shouldn't be feeling this at ease. The last 3 laps were much harder. But Myler says that her body also helped her regulate herself. The internal governor will not allow you to push 100%, she says. She's smart enough to never allow the baby any danger. It feels weird trying to go all out and still having about 10 to 15% in the tank at the end, knowing there was just no way for you to spend it. Our bodies are incredible. It's worth noting she came in 4th out of 29 runners. While Myler's time and placement are impressive, her fastest non-pregnant mile is 4 minutes and 37 seconds. As with our first child, Myler has continued to train throughout her pregnancy, albeit with some adjustments. I've been training less like a marathoner, more like I'm about to do a 5K, she says. More speed workouts, still 60-minute runs and long runs in between. I've also added in a bit more cycling on the trainer this time and a lot more regimented Olympic weightlifting. The weights prevent injury, strengthen joints, and keep me poppy, even with 25 extra pounds. While most people in the comments of Myler's Instagram post cheered her on and shared words of encouragement, others questioned the safety of running that fast during pregnancy. It's important to point out that the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, ACOG, encourages women with uncomplicated pregnancies to engage in aerobic and strength conditioning exercises before, during, and after pregnancy. ACOG also includes this note for athletes. Vigorous intensity exercise completed into the third trimester appears to be safe for most healthy pregnancies. Doctors agree that it's safe for competitive runners to keep training during pregnancy if they feel comfortable with it. My general recommendation to athletes in pregnancy is to continue most of their training without any significant changes, with the caveat that if they're starting to feel unsteady and at risk for fear of abdominal trauma, avoid that during pregnancy anytime after 16 weeks. Dr. Kirsten Leitner, assistant professor of clinical obstetrics and gynecology at the Perelman School of Medicine, University of Pennsylvania, tells Yahoo Life. Otherwise, they're fine to keep running. Myler says her lower back hurt when she was done with the race, but she otherwise felt good. I got excited for a second that labor was coming, but I just felt uncomfortable for an hour or so, she says. Myler says it's important for her to challenge the notion of what a woman can accomplish during pregnancy. I have a decent following of women who are either mothers or candidates to be mothers and are at least partially involved in the running world. She says, I want everyone to know, but particularly this slice of the population, that reality as it's been painted for them should always be questioned, particularly if the message of that reality is some version of you can't. But as she noted in her Instagram post about the race, there is no need for other pregnant women to think, how worthless and lazy am I, about themselves. Just know that's not the point, she told her followers. This is not a game of comparison, and a healthy, happy pregnancy should be your only goal.
That's an incredible story. I did see that on, I guess, did you say it was on the Run Club page? Somebody posted on there? Yeah, I did see that. And we've always kind of known, or the way I've always been told is that if you were doing it before you got pregnant, then it's okay to be doing it after you got pregnant. So if you were running really fast miles, you don't want to start something like that during pregnancy.
Right.
But if you were doing it prior to getting pregnant, then it's completely safe and okay to do it after pregnancy. That really drives me crazy when you see, I mean, this is a professional runner who, this is her life. She knows what she's doing. And for people to come on there and throw rocks and talk about how safe, obviously not knowing that it is, just drives me up the wall.
It always does me too. The other point about this too, though, is that she points out here to sometimes question what people are telling you, because sometimes the things and the conventional wisdom out there is not wisdom at all. And in this case, there are a lot of people who, when they get pregnant, they sit down and they don't do anything. And it's really not good for them. That's really worse for them and for the baby. It's better if they're doing, particularly, again, as you mentioned, if you're doing it beforehand, keep doing those things.
Sure.
And it's hard. I know I've talked with a lot of pregnant ladies, and it's hard for pregnant women to keep doing stuff because you're, a lot of reasons. Hormones, you're carrying around all the extra weight. You know, there's a lot of reasons why it gets hard to live your life and continue doing the things you're doing. But you can do it, and if you do it, it is good for you. Yeah, for sure. All right, how about a trivia question for this week? This one's interesting. I don't know where I found this, but this is fun. You just read it, didn't you?
Yeah. Where do you come up with these? I have no idea.
What is the world record for running a half marathon backwards? So if you know the answer to that one, send it to dean@runforgod.com. And if you're the first person to send that to me, then you will win.
I'll bet it's faster than I've ever run a half marathon frontwards. I'm going to go out on a limb and say
Are you going to go out on a limb and say that? What's your PR?
48, I think.
That's,
148, 149, something like that.
Yeah.
Don't give any indication, but
Yeah. It's running.
I'm betting it's faster than that.
Yeah.
But I could be completely wrong. You may come out and say 4 hours. I don't know.
Could be.
But usually these, if you're asking it, there's something that makes you go, wow.
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting thought, and we'll talk more about running backwards next week. All right, let me leave you with this motivational thought of the week. This is Amy Hastings Cragg quoting her mantra that she uses during a marathon. I love this, and this is what she does during a marathon that helps her. I breathe in strength and breathe out weakness. The idea of every time you breathe in, you're getting stronger, and every time you breathe out, you're pushing that weakness out of your body.
Well, one of our signs that we put on the race course says sweat is weakness leaving the body.
That's right. Yeah.
I like
Good
that.
stuff. Positive self-talk works. I'm telling you. Do it. All right. We are 157 episodes down.
Into year 4.
Into year 4.
Congratulations, Dean. You've done a great job.
Well, and you
For those of you out there who don't know, I'm just the guy that shows up and sits here and talks with Dean. But Dean's the one that puts all this together. He puts all the outlines together. He writes a lot of this stuff. And so great job.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I appreciate it. And for everybody else, until next week, may God bless every step of every run. Go out there and shine your light.
Good job, Dean.
For more information about the Run for God ministry, go to runforgod.com. If you have questions about your salvation, click on the Peace with God tab. There's nothing more important. Thanks for joining us today.